For many East Texans, Roy Knight is best known as the former superintendent for Lufkin ISD. But before that, before he led a school district, he was a teacher, a coach, a mentor, and someone who believed every student deserved someone in their corner. And I think that takes a lot, and it really shows so much about what you do for your kiddos. Before we get into, what you're doing now outside of, in retirement and everything else, what led you to education? Was there something that you knew as a young child that you were like, I want to be a teacher? What was it?
Well, outside of my parents, my dad was a Methodist preacher. My mom, obviously, a preacher's wife. The most influential people in my life were school teachers.
Oh.
I grew up here in East Texas. I went to 6 different schools in 12 years.
Oh, that's tough.
Well, you're forced as a kid to learn how to adapt and adjust to new circumstances, which proved to be an advantage for an adult, not so much for a kid. But along the way, I would say, to answer your question specifically, there were 2 teachers who were so influential in my life. One was in the 4th grade.
Mm-hmm.
I had missed the first 12 weeks of the 3rd grade from a broken leg.
Oh, ow.
Yeah, it occurred the day we registered for school. A garage door fell on my leg.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and so I was behind by the time I got to the 4th grade.
Mm-hmm.
So we registered for school. We hoped to choose our teacher, and I wanted Ms. Burke. She was young and pretty and cute, and all the 4th grade boys wanted Ms. Burke. As it turned out, I got Ms. Robinson, who was more matronly, a middle-aged school teacher, and her husband was our mayor in Dangerfield, Texas.
Okay.
And to that end, it proved to be one of the most wonderful experiences I'd ever had. I was a summer baby, real immature, cried a lot the first 3 years of school, and was still behind. Early on in that school year, obviously, my 3rd grade teacher had told my 4th grade teacher that I was behind and I needed help. And so she kept me in the first couple of weeks of school to teach me place systems in math. Roy, you appear to be so smart, she would say, so I'm going to teach you so you can make a presentation to the PTA on tens, hundreds, and thousands places in math. I wanted to be out at recess with all the rest of the kids, but she kept me in. And so along the way, she would call on me in front of my peers. She'd say, Roy, what is this? Oh, that's tens. What's it? That's thousands. And then she'd say, Roy, Knight, you are so smart. Now, I wasn't the smartest kid in the classroom, but she made me feel that way.
Oh.
She had an extremely influential effect on me, understanding as an educator. She made me feel valued.
Yeah.
Now, years later, in my senior year at high school, I had a brand new high school coach my senior year, Pat Wood, no longer with us, who was the first coach I had that would put his arm around me, hug my neck, and say, Knight, I love you, son. Now bend over for horseplaying in the dressing room. And so, I left school. I tell this story only half teasing. I didn't really know what I wanted to be when I left school. My high school counselor said, Roy, you're pretty good at math and science.
Yeah.
Why don't you explore being an engineer?
Yeah.
And I said, Ms. Lane, I got to tell you, I rode to New York City and back on a train. I really don't care that much about trains and being an engineer. Now, I'd love to tell you I was just kidding.
Yeah.
But I knew nothing about civil engineering or otherwise. And my first job right out of high school was working for the Texas Department of Transportation on a survey crew. And I thought I was going to be a civil engineer. Somewhere around my sophomore year at A&M, I realized I didn't want to spend my life doing those kind of things, building bridges and highways and structures, and that would be the sum total of it. I wanted to be Coach Wood. And so that's how I wound up in public education, and it was a great 40-plus years for me.
Oh, wow. Getting to be, when you were a teacher and you were a coach, do you have moments where those influences from the teacher in 4th grade to the coach that left that mark with you, where they came out of you in your teaching abilities?
Yeah. So here's what that looks like. And
Okay.
I said this to a group of teachers today at Lufkin Middle School we served breakfast. And you're a school teacher. You often wonder, how do I know I really am born to be a teacher? And so I use this as a couple of examples. If you're sitting in church and the kid in front of you is cutting up and misbehaving, and you have the urge to reach over and thump him on the head and say, boy, you better sit still, you have teacher blood in you. If you're standing in line at the movies and kids are scrambling every which way for a kid type movie, and you have the urge to say, boy, you better get back in line, you're destined to be a teacher. You have that in you. And I say all that to say, you find ways to help kids be successful. I say this often, nothing good happens at the schoolhouse outside of trusting relationships. And if you can build trusting relationships, then you can be successful as a teacher or as an administrator, particularly as a building principal.
When you were teaching and coaching, which one came more naturally to you?
Coaching did.
Okay.
Coaching did.
In football?
Well, it's Texas.
Yeah, you get a little bit of everything.
Yeah. Football comes first. I was fortunate enough, and I learned early on that I was a far better coach when I had real good athletes. And but through the years, again, the thing that carries you is not the X's and O's part. The thing that carries you is your ability to build relationships with kids. And gratefully for me, I grew up in a household with a relationship builder in both a mom and a dad. So I got to witness that all the time. I saw what that was like. Then all those years that we moved to those different school districts, I called Jefferson home because it's where I went to high school.
Yeah.
You develop those skills because you're forced to learn to meet and greet people, to adapt to new circumstances. So that gave me a plus in the school business. Plus, I was really fortunate in right after my wife Janet and I were married, we got an opportunity to work in a school district in Central Texas called Cameron, rural farming community. We had good athletes. We were real successful, and I thought, there's not much to this coaching deal. I came right into this, and we won, and we did real well till we had a bout of athletes that weren't nearly as good. And I wasn't as smart as I thought I was back then as a high school coach. But it's hard to set. Coaching is teaching.
Yes, it is.
And coaching, particularly in football, where you have a variety of talent and skill levels.
Personalities?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Egos, personalities,
Yes.
all those things. And you have to find a way to meld those all together where they can play together. And the important part is not that you have a lot of perfect parts, but you have a lot of parts that play together perfectly.
Yes.
So that's the common goal.
I love that. The way you said that was so pretty.
Thank you.
What subject did you teach when you were in the classroom?
Well, I was primarily a math teacher.
Okay.
And I spent a lot of years doing that. That really came from all my background, all the math classes I had to take early on as a civil engineer major at A&M to start with.
Right.
And so it lent itself to that. But, I also taught in smaller schools, not only Cameron, but DeKalb, Texas. If you're not from DeKalb, you call it DeKalb.
Yes.
And
Goodness.
but where in small schools back in the day, you could teach outside your certification field one class a day. So I taught U.S. history one year and government and economics another. And it adds diversity to it makes it a little more challenging because you have to kind of study and prepare ahead of time. You just got to stay ahead of the kids.
Yes, yes. When you were teaching, because teaching can be so stressful, what kept you coming in every single day?
Yeah, I liked what I did.
Yeah.
Honestly, and I'm asked often now, do you miss your job? Well, I miss the kids. I miss my staff, but I don't miss that job. But in the end, the kids keep you coming back. Those relationships that you develop with those young folks through the years, and now, for me, many of the kids that I coached years ago now qualify for Medicare. So it's been a long journey as well. And I did it over 40 years, and I'd do it all again.
Yeah.
I don't have any regrets. Now, I did some really foolish things along the way. Teaching
when
is
you're young, you're learning and everything else.
You stump your toe, and education, particularly when you're right out of college, it's trial and error and mostly error.
Yeah.
And you pray. If you stay in the business, that means you learn from your errors.
Right.
You learn from those mistakes, and I say this often to young people who are interested in moving up in the school business. If you're going to move up, you need to move on. And here's why. all those mistakes in judgment that you made in your prior job, you carry those forward as valuable learning experiences in your next job. I could say that's true in your business.
Absolutely.
And you stump your toe and you learn from it, and those mistakes in judgment become valuable learning experiences in your next job. And stock in you goes up when you make those transitions.
Absolutely. It's value to you as an employee, as a human, as an adult.
Right.
Do you have moments where you kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? How am I trying to say this? When you run into past students in the grocery store, what have you, maybe you've run into them in your career, what is it like for you to say, oh my gosh, you were this big in the classroom so many years ago? How does that feel to you?
Well, it feels rewarding, and here's why.
Okay.
If you've done a really good job with developing the right kind of relationships with kids, whether you can remember them exactly or not, they remember you.
Yeah.
They remember me. They'll stop me. And I just hate Walmart trips because going through Walmart now, and I've been over 30 years in Lufkin altogether, and I still have relationships with kids from Cameron in 1974. And when they see me, they date themselves when they call me Coach Knight. Coach Knight, do you remember me? Well, you're going to have to help me. I'm 75 and it's been a lot of years, and people will go, help me remember.
Yeah.
And they'll tell me, and then they'll recall some incident that I may or may not recall.
Right.
But they see that as an opportunity where I either had to hug their neck or get after their behinds. And they remember that, and that it had some impact on them. If I'm not remembered finally, they usually don't stop me and talk to me in the grocery store.
I love that.
But they're rewarding. Those are rewarding times.
Do you have a moment or a memory that has stayed with you that's kind of like you've kind of kept in your heart?
Yeah, they fall in two categories.
Okay.
One of those categories is career altering events that happened.
Okay.
And I have 3 or 4 of those that I relate to teachers often. I have the opportunity this week to speak to 3 different teacher groups in their opening convocations, and my job in those is to remind them why you're so valuable to kids.
Right.
And the other are stories about things I've learned, memories that I've made, where kids had such a positive influence on me as well. So I've got some of those stories.
Are you willing to share one or two?
Yeah, I'll share one. I'll share one on a life-altering experience. Typically, these kinds of experiences have to do with things you didn't learn in college. And one of those was when my dear friend John Outlaw lost a daughter. And I was called from the sheriff's department in Arkadelphia, Arkansas, where John and his family had lived for many years, and told that she had died suddenly. And I had to go tell Coach Outlaw. Well, I've got to tell you, he's a dear friend. But I didn't have a college course to tell you how you go tell your friend that one of your children has passed. And so that's part of the relationship and the compassion that's required. In this case, compassion for a man that we all loved.
Yeah.
Oftentimes you have to express compassion for someone that you may not think deserves it. The truth is, everyone deserves compassion in a circumstance like that. So those are the kinds of things that often teachers are not prepared for, but they have to experience and help children through. And sometimes it's for kids that are hard to like. You love them just the same, but they're hard to like.
Yeah.
And so you have to figure out a way that I've got to broaden that child's horizon. The other are stories about kids who've overcome not only my influence, but they've overcome their own family backgrounds. And sometimes an opportunity where a kid, I had a young lady in many years ago, this was in the early 90s, who moved to our school district, and she was a volleyball player. And about halfway through her first volleyball season in her junior year, she got sick and just couldn't seem to overcome it. And the mom came to me and said, Roy, we think she may have leukemia.
Oh, my goodness.
And, as it turned out, over time, I went to see her. She was hospitalized right before her senior year began. And again, this is one of those, I didn't have a college course for this, and I went to see the young lady, and if I called her name, many of her peers today would still remember this.
Oh,
And in the hospital with her dad there, and I said, called her name, and I said, what are the doctors telling you? The mom had told me they were running lots of tests. And she looked at her dad and said, Dad, with this cryptic look on her face, he said, honey, it's yours to tell. She said, Mr. Knight, I have AIDS. She was 16 years old. She had lived in Thailand, which at the time, with her father and mother, her dad worked in the oil field safety industry, and she had contracted AIDS when she cut her hand on a piece of coral swimming in the Sea of Japan, goes to a hospital there in Thailand with the highest, at that time, the highest AIDS rate in the world, where they routinely reuse needles. That's how she contracted the disease.
oh goodness.
You know, the scary part for me through that was the adults handled it far worse than the kids did. The kids were forgiving, embraced her,
Yeah.
took her in, supported her. The adults, on the other hand, were terrified. This was a time when we still thought you could get AIDS from commode seats.
Right.
And so, understanding that now, but it was a tough time. The last day I saw her was 2 days before high school graduation, when I gave her her diploma in the hospital bed. She died the next day.
Oh.
So there are circumstances like that
Yeah.
that often remind you why you're in this business. And the real lesson for me was kids are far more forgiving than adults are. They're willing to look past the external things that really don't matter much,
Right.
as well. And again, I'd tell you, I didn't have a college course for that. You just weather the storm. Lots of school administrators, since I've been retired, went through much of the same thing with the COVID,
Yes.
with the pandemic then. There were no set of instruction booklets that came along with that. And yet school administrators made hard decisions. And in every case, and at that point in time, I was doing a lot of school board trainings. And it didn't matter what decision a school board or a school superintendent made, half your population was going to love it, the other half was going to hate it. And you just dealt with it. That was part of your territory then. But we're through that now. We learned a lot about what we would and wouldn't do the next time around.
Right.
And I just hope it's another 100 years before schools have to engage in that again.
What was one of the hardest things for you? Because like you mentioned, you were a part of the, oversight view of that time.
Yeah.
What kind of decisions were you helping people through?
Well, first of all, you had to follow the law.
Right.
The hardest part, though, was real technical things.
Yeah.
Like how do we access Chromebooks? How do we engage with the Commissioner of Education so we can move forward a lot faster than it appears we're going to be able to do? Are we going to be held accountable for test scores when we can't even hold class? Those are things that are going through their heads because
Right.
Schools' reputations are at stake.
Right.
They're
Funding's at stake even at that point.
Absolutely, and it was so unclear at that time. And again, you can't find fault with any leadership at that point in time because we'd never done this before.
Right.
And so there would be disputes within school boards about what the best route to take was. And again, that was a trial and error and mostly error, and you tried something. If it worked, great. If it didn't, you tried something different then.
Yeah.
And so, but everyone, regardless of your opinion, everyone cared about the kids.
Yes.
How we would deal with it or do it one way or the other didn't matter as long as you took that to heart. The tough part, though, were people who demonized whatever decision you made. They didn't have any suggestions on how you ought to handle it. They just didn't like what you did do. And hindsight's always 20/20, but again, it's like sitting in the grandstands and someone says, "Well, why did he call that play?" Well, because he thought it would work. And if he knew the outcome in advance, he'd have called something different. So that's kind of how this same thing was with the pandemic as well.
Well, with your view and your experience before COVID and then after, have you seen any kind of big changes in the classroom or even the children?
Well, yeah, here's the biggest change that I've seen,
Yeah.
frankly, happens with kids. It takes a long time to build a school culture.
Yeah.
and around order, around compassion, around relationship. It takes a while to do that. We went almost 2 years without that, without much structure for kids. And so we learned after Hurricane Harvey that it literally takes almost 5 years to overcome a loss of your culture simply because you weren't meeting in school every day in normal school cultural circumstances. So we're really right at 5 years after the final vestiges of COVID. And so we're just now beginning to see us return to that. But that was the hardest part, is the loss of your culture. And, mamas and dads desperately understood what a classroom teacher goes through when their child was home all day, every day for a year.
And they're having to still go to work and do their things on their phone and computer and everything else.
Yeah, it was not a good time. I pray we never have that again, but we'll be better for it, better prepared next time should that happen. Roy probably won't be alive to see it, but nonetheless, there have been valuable lessons learned along the way.
Is technology, I'm curious to know more about, because I know you had mentioned the Chromebooks and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
Technology, how do we feel about that in the classroom?
Yeah.
Just from your history.
Well, I likely would not survive in the social media days today as I did back then. I'm a proponent for no cell phones in the classrooms. No cell phones at school would be okay with me. Parents want to be far more connected, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. But
sure.
Here's what I saw, and I retired 13 years ago, just as, that was still MySpace and Facebook, and there were some others out there, and Facebook wasn't, now Meta, wasn't nearly as predominant as it is today. And the things that I've seen and that I feared was that the safe place for kids is the schoolhouse, where they can learn to interact in a socially appropriate fashion with one another while they're supervised.
Right.
And phones took that away because they were no longer socially interacting in a one-on-one basis in the cafeteria, in the hallways as well. They all had a phone stuck to their hands and in their face, and there wasn't really appropriate social interaction. So along that line, it also became, and I saw this early on with some of my own grandchildren, it's so easy when you're riding down the road to stick a device in a kid's hands and they're glued to a screen the whole time you're driving because they're not bothering you while you're riding.
Yeah.
And so one of the most valuable things that a parent can do is teach their kid how to deal with failure. And social media, where if we're only measuring our self-worth with children by likes on a Facebook page or some other social media device, that's a false sense of who a person is. It gives them a wrong impression that I'm a child of God and I have gifts and talents, and someone other than my mama recognizes that. And so I'm leave cell phones at home. When parents say to me, well, how am I going to get in touch with my kid if there's an emergency?
Right.
Well, my answer to that is the same way that they did when you were in school. They call the office and I go get you.
Yeah.
That's and part of that is really some of the codependencies that parents develop with their own children. Right or wrong, it occurs, and it lends itself to more what we used to call helicopter parents, where we hover over our kids and make sure they're at the right place at the right time and they're in with the right group and all those kind of things. Well, now we have what I call road grader parents. They're not preparing their kid for the road ahead. They're preparing the road ahead for their child. They make sure that there are no bumps, no hurdles, no adversity that a child ever has to overcome because I've smoothed it out for them.
Right.
Later on, those kids are back at home because they got fired at the job because they can't overcome any kind of adversity, or they can't solve a problem outside of their own scope of knowledge and skills. So I likely would not survive in today's media circus as a building principal. But again, I go back to the most important thing are relationships. And any school person who learns how to build relationships it can be successful. The other side of that is if I'm hell bent on being heard by everybody and I can't hear the people that I work with, I won't last long. Shame on me. Shame on me. So that's all part of the school culture.
Is there a final statement, word, or thought that you want to leave us on for tonight?
Sure. Yeah, I've got a lot of final thoughts. You'll edit the last one out. The final part in this is parents are indeed the first teachers. But for the next 10 months, beginning this month, the most influential person in your child's life is going to be their teacher. And when your kid comes home and tells you their view of what happened, you should say, you know, I'm going to talk to the teacher first before I believe everything that you said along the way. And when a parent would say to me, Roy, my kid said so-and-so, and my kids never lied to me, my response is mine didn't either, but I caught them at 1 or 2. So it's important that you value that teacher, support them. Teachers aren't going to be perfect.
Yeah.
They're not. But above all, if you have a teacher that's challenging for your child, teach your child how to adjust and adapt and deal with some adversity with the teacher.
Yeah.
That'll carry them a long way as an adult.
Well, thank you so much.
And then the final thing I'd say
Yes.
that you'll edit out is it's a great time to be a Lufkin Panther.